welcome back to Muses and Mystics. I am Percy.
And I'm Kalo.
And this week we are going to be talking about some beginner myths and misinformation.
It's a lot. It's a big loaded topic.
It's a bit, we were gonna do 1 week and then I started thinking about all of the myths and misinformation and dumb shit that I learned when I was 13 and I was like, perhaps more than 1 week.
Yeah.
Because it's gonna take more than an hour to unpack all of the things that I had to unlearn over the last 7 years.
Yeah.
Well, the shit that I had to learn and then unlearn.
Yeah. I remember, because I was, the time that you were getting into, all this kind of witchy stuff when you were 13, it was around the time I had a lot of friends in high school that were getting into it, and I wasn't necessarily practicing, but I still remember them talking about it and stuff, and being thinking back on it now, that shit is insane.
Yeah.
It was, so unsafe and all that other stuff.
There was people were like, yeah, drink your crystals.
Don't. Please don't.
Do not drink your crystals, guys.
It's bad.
So I think, of course, the first misconception that we can start with is the most obvious one. We do not live in Harry Potter.
Yeah. Nor would we want to.
No, there's lots of anti-Semitism and class problems there that we don't really need to unpack right now.
No, this isn't a Harry Potter episode.
Could be, but isn't. But yeah, guys, we're not gonna be flying. You're not gonna be able to just click your fingers and light something on fire. I'm sorry, but we don't get weird mystical immediate powers.
Yeah.
No shooting lightning.
It's unfortunate, but it's true.
It's very upsetting. I know, but unfortunately, you cannot levitate and you cannot shoot fire from your fingertips.
No, that attitude you can't.
Have you managed to do it yet?
Oh no.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
Exactly.
So you can't fly, guys. No. I wish I could fly. I would love to be able to fly.
Being able to fly would be fantastic, but I can't.
No. Unfortunately, it defies our current known laws of physics and reality.
Yeah.
So that's another thing. Your magic doesn't defy science.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff that goes around and weird sus things, and there's a lot of people in our community, unfortunately, who are essentially science deniers.
Yeah.
And that is not a good thing.
Nope.
We believe in science in
this house.
Science
is good. Science is good. I'm doing a science degree. Science is great.
Science is good. I am not currently doing a science degree, but science is good.
Yeah.
Science gives us things like medication and vaccines. And to an extent, actually, some of the practices you might end up working with in your witchcraft journey are sciences.
Yeah.
Like herbalism.
Mm-hmm.
It's essentially a science.
Yep.
And you have to understand the interactions of the herbs and how they work with your body, with another person's body, with any medications you're taking. It's, yeah.
Yeah. Even extending on that point, even crystals and stuff.
Yeah.
That's still, science is still important with that, those kind of things when it comes to crystal safety.
Oh yeah, crystal safety. Do not put your selenite in water. Do not do that. It will dissolve and become a poisonous substance. It's bad. Selenite is toxic. You don't want to be powdering it or dissolving it.
Yeah.
There are other crystals, but
yeah.
Selenite is just the one I immediately jumped to, and malachite.
Yeah.
Those two, especially, be very careful with. I have a resource doc that has links where you can check which crystals are water safe and what you can do with certain crystals. But you can also just Google it.
Yeah.
Google friend.
Yes.
Google is your best friend.
Yes. Yeah. Google, just any search engine, really.
Yeah.
It'll be your friend.
Just look things up before doing them.
Yeah.
and the safety, not just like the correspondences of the thing, look up the safety of the thing as well.
Yeah.
We don't want any injuries out here. We don't want people drinking selenite water and getting sick. We also don't want people lighting their hair on fire.
Like this one did. How many? Oh, like not
a few months ago.
Yeah, a few months ago.
You can still be stupid when you've been practicing for 7 years.
Yeah, I'm surprised I didn't light my hair on fire, considering how crazy my hair was when it was still long.
Yeah. So basically the lesson here is that you can make stupid mistakes even when you've been doing this for a long time, and you should continue to reassess your own safety and the safety of those around you while you're practicing. Because otherwise you can do something like light your hair on fire.
Yeah.
Which is not a fun experience. It smells very bad. It's not good for your hair. It's not good for your anxiety either.
No.
It's just overall a bad experience.
Yeah. I can't believe you did that.
I was so scared.
Yeah.
I just like noticed this flame out of the side of my eye. I was like, eh!
Yeah. Oh my god.
It was very stressful, guys.
Oh my god.
Don't lean over candles when you have your hair out. If you have long hair, tie it up before you light your candles.
Yeah. Gosh.
This goes equally for like flammable fabrics and stuff.
Yeah.
Don't put them over fire. If you're burning something, put it in a fire-safe dish.
Yeah. And also, like, when the candle is getting, like, close to the end of it, make sure you keep an eye on that and, like, blow it out sooner rather than later. Because you don't want that fire-safe dish to explode.
Yeah. And also trim your wicks.
Yes.
Your wicks should be, like, 1/4 of an inch.
Yeah. So, like, what's that?
Well, an inch is 2.5 centimeters. So it should be a bit under half.
Yeah. I try to aim for like 5 millimeters, around 5 millimeters.
Yeah.
6 millimeters. Yeah.
Kind of around there. Not long, basically, and you don't want it to have any like build up on the end of it if you get those little lumps on the end of the wick.
That's bad, and it'll just make a lot of soot, and it'll make your breathing actually quite strained.
It smokes, it can spit. It's not good. You should cut that off as soon as it forms.
Yeah.
When the candle is out, don't put your scissors in a live flame.
The amount of times I've done that.
Don't.
I
Also, don't put tons of oils and herbs around or crystals. I see a lot of these candles on Etsy and stuff, which look really gorgeous.
But then they have
but the top of them is covered in like glitter and herbs and crystals. And the crystals can explode and the herbs can light on fire.
Yeah.
I think Of Batbones on TikTok has made a video about this recently. Like, you can put oils and herbs on there, but you then shouldn't use that candle for flame reading because the flame is going to be influenced not just by the wick, but also by the herbs and oils that you're burning. But also try not to let them light, like try not to put flammable herbs too close to the flame because you can end up with like just a giant bowl of flame.
Yeah.
It's not fun to deal with. I've done that before. It's very scary.
Yeah.
Because you just have a bowl and it's full of fire sitting on your desk in your house with fire and so I do most of my practice in my bedroom because that's like when I lived at my parents', my space was in my bedroom, and living here, my space is in my bedroom. So, and in both cases, the fire alarm has been directly outside my door.
Yep. So
setting things on fire has always been something I've had to be careful with. And sometimes you fuck up. And I can very safely tell you that standing in my room, looking at a bowl full of fire, just sitting on my desk, and hearing my dad open the door.
Yeah.
And yell out my name and be like, "What are you doing? Can you come and help me with something?" And looking at this bowl of fire and being like, I need to put this out before the smoke reaches the fire alarm directly outside my door. Very stressful experience.
Yeah.
Fortunately, the bathroom is also right next to my bedroom, so I could just go and like put it in there and run water on it and put it out.
Yeah.
but it was very stressful.
Yeah, I've had like 3 house fires. It doesn't matter what situation it is. It's like, yeah, they were all in the kitchen, and 2 of them, actually all of them weren't my fault.
None of them were related to witchcraft.
None of these were related to witchcraft either. This is just kitchen stuff.
Kalo did not burn down their house by being a witch.
No.
Just disclaimer there.
Yeah, just like my mum was like cooking and forgot she had oil on. But yeah, having a giant pot on fire and not knowing how to deal with that as like an 8-year-old, terrifying.
Yeah.
Because like my mum was upstairs bathing my little sister and I'm just there sitting on the kitchen counter reading like a teen magazine. And then suddenly a ball of flames. And I'm like, oh, Mum, by the way, kitchen's on fire. Don't know what we want to do about this.
Stress times.
Yeah.
I have never had something quite that terrifying happen.
I've had lots of experiences with fire. It's always scary.
Yes. And of course, there's always different circumstances. Like, we're talking about candles and, like, indoor fires. But if you're doing something like a bonfire for one of the Sabbats or something, still be careful.
Yeah. Like, especially in a country like Australia, when we're in drought season, you're not allowed to have a bonfire a lot of the time.
Yeah, every year we have a fire ban in Australia. It usually runs from like September, October until kind of mid-May.
Yeah, because like when we have bushfires, they're absolutely so out of control. Oh my god.
Because in drought season, and just even if it's not a drought, in summer in general, it's so hot and so dry that even the slightest spark, like we've had bushfires start from somebody dropping a cigarette butt. Yeah. Like a butt that's been put out and they've just dropped it and there's been enough of a spark still left to light up. Yeah. Because we have eucalyptus oil, which is really flammable, and also just dry plants. Yeah. And I know circumstances are pretty similar in like California. Jinx.
Yeah, be safe with fire, and if you're doing fire outdoors, make sure you pay attention to like your local council or state like laws when it comes to like safety.
Yes, you might need to go through your fire department to get a permit or something like that. I know you can do that process in Australia during the fire ban season. You can sometimes apply for a license to have a fire. But you won't always be granted it depending on how bad the conditions are. Yeah. But yeah, just be careful with your mundane safety, not just your magical safety. Yeah. Because if you accidentally hurt or injure yourself on the physical plane, then that's probably gonna be a problem. Yeah. You know? Like, it's not... You're much more likely, actually, to hurt yourself doing a spell than you are to be attacked by some malevolent entity or something. The biggest danger in magical practice is actually just being stupid with it.
Yeah, that's true.
Because they're, like, to piss off an entity or a deity or whatever is difficult. Like, you have to do a lot. Mm. Or be very unlucky to have walked into something's space. Yeah. To accidentally light something on fire, or set your fire alarm off, or chip a crystal and end up with some of it in water or something is much easier to do.
Like, take this from someone that's eaten turpentine in their art studio. Like, it's very easy to fuck up, okay? It's extremely easy.
If there's bread in your art studio or your science lab, don't eat it.
Yeah.
That's my advice. Yeah. Don't eat anything that is in your science or art studio. Yeah.
And by extension, your altar.
Yes. Don't put things on your altar that, like, if as you're working with things, like, it's different if you just accidentally set a cup of coffee on a deity altar and then have to be like, hey, can I
have it back?
Can I have that back? That's a different thing. But if you've got an active working going and you, like, accidentally drop a crystal in a cup of water or something, don't drink the water. I don't care how short of a time the crystal was in the water.
Don't.
If it's water soluble, do not drink that water. If you don't know whether or not it's water soluble, do not drink that water.
Yeah.
This applies to tea or coffee or whatever. Like if you have dropped it in a liquid you are planning to consume, do not consume that liquid. Please.
Yeah.
Please.
Your safety is important.
So I think moving on from safety, the other thing to jump into is resources, because knowing when you're going to be safe is something that you're going to have to learn.
Yeah.
Because you may not necessarily be, like, have dealt with these spirits or entities or materials before now.
Yeah.
Like,
at least, like, I think it'll, like, I want to say, especially if you're white, because, at least with, like, a lot of people of color, and, like, myself in particular, like, we grew up in a culture, because, like, my family we're Balinese Hindu, which means, like, we're used to dealing with, like, candles and incense and all these kind of things, and, like, the idea of, like, spirits and stuff like that, like, being in your space. And, like,
whereas I grew up in a white atheist family.
Yeah.
So bringing in things like candles and crystals and incense was very much a new thing for me and for my family.
Yeah.
Like, we lived on a farm, so we dealt with fire and I understood fire safety. Because we have bonfires and at times we are affected by the bushfire season, and so I understood all of that. But it was still a new experience bringing it into the house and into a spiritual practice.
Yeah.
And finding out how to manage that, both in the mundane safety sense and in the magical and spiritual safety sense, was a very different experience.
Yeah. Like, I feel like a lot of people, they don't really realize how important it is to, like, when you're dealing with spirits, to, like, respect them. Because, like, you're, especially if you're, like, calling us, like, you're like, they're just chilling and you're just, like, yanking them. Like, be like, hi, I want to have a talk. I want you to, hi. And they're like, bitch, I don't know you.
Yeah.
So it's important to, like, be really respectful.
And it depends on which system you're working with spirits in. They will have different bases for interaction.
Yeah, so make sure you know.
So, yeah, like, for example, demonolatry versus Solomonic magic or Goetia, very different ways of dealing with similar entities.
Yeah.
Because they have a fundamentally different basis for how and what those entities are and how they react and interact.
Yeah.
So if you're going to start interacting with something, you really need to consider what system you're interacting with them through and whether they are attached to that system.
Yeah.
Because you can't just decide that you're going to interact with, say, Aphrodite through the Goetia.
Yeah, don't do that.
That, like, Aphrodite is going to approach you from a very different perspective to a goetic demon.
Yeah.
And if you start approaching her as though she's a goetic demon, there's gonna be problems.
You're gonna piss her off. Extremely.
Yes, you can't. We're jumping to a new topic here.
Yeah.
Which is cultural context.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff in modern witchcraft, particularly in New Age practices and Wicca, where the cultural context of certain deities, entities, practices, etc. has been stripped away.
Yeah.
And that causes problems.
Yeah.
Because once you are removing an entity or a practice from its cultural context, you can't understand why it is the way it is, how it interacts, how you should interact with it. Like, you can't understand its basis for its own perspective on the universe. You can't understand the basis for how you should interact with it. And also it's kind of disrespectful to the cultures that those things are taken from.
Yeah.
Like you'll see, particularly, let's go for example, Wicca, you will see a lot of Celtic deities and practices being removed from their cultural contexts, such as Brigid, who is also Bride, and she is a very different deity in Ireland compared to how she appears in some other Celtic nations. And she is completely different to how she appears in Wicca.
Yeah.
And to work then with Bride or Brigid is to work with the Irish deity, or are you working with the Welsh deity, or are you working with the Wiccan deity? Because those are three different things.
Yeah. And like, you'll also encounter a lot of things that have just been made up and don't actually exist. Like, what is it, the Irish tree zodiac thing?
The tree zodiacs. Celtic tree zodiacs do not exist.
It's not real.
I'm sorry, but it's not a thing.
Yeah.
They're
interesting, but it's not real.
Yeah. It's not a traditional Celtic practice.
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of things that exist in New Age theories, but don't actually exist outside of those theories.
Yeah.
They're not traditional. They're not, like, you can't trace them back to a traditional Celtic practice, and anyone claiming that Wicca or Celtic tree zodiacs or anything like that is some ancient traditional practice is wrong.
Yeah.
Wicca was invented in like the 1920s by Gerald Gardner. And there's different strains of Wicca now because they were influenced by people like Doreen Valiente and la la la. So you have like Gardnerian Wicca, Alexandrian Wicca, but they are all not, like, they're all modern traditions.
Yeah.
Nothing there is an ancient millennia-old Celtic practice.
Yeah.
There was no witch coven in the woods. There was only Gerald Gardner. Which brings us to, not everyone's Wiccan.
Yeah. I'm not. We're both not.
Neither of us are. Coming into witchcraft, you will probably find in a lot of spaces that the dominant theory is Wiccan.
Yeah.
And that it is assumed that every witch will come to a Wiccan and or pagan path.
Yeah. And that's just not right.
I happen to have become pagan after becoming a practicing witch, but for the first sort of 4 years of my craft, I wasn't working with any deities.
Yeah. And like, I'm a Christian witch, you know? Well, I don't, because I am a Christian witch, but I prefer the term Abrahamic because I'm Christian, but I'm also Jewish because I'm Ashkenazi, and also I have a lot of family that's Muslim. So I have I've grown up around like Muslim faith, Islamic like faith interpretations of like God and all that kind of stuff as well. So like my specific strain of like Christian witchcraft doesn't really look a lot like anyone else's. So yeah.
Yeah, and so like every practice is going to be different, and not every pagan that you meet will be a witch, and not every witch that you meet will be a pagan or a Wiccan.
Yeah.
You don't have to be Wiccan to be a witch, you don't have to be pagan to be a witch, you don't have to be a witch to be pagan.
Yeah.
They're three separate terms, and honestly, I think learning that is one of the most important differentiations you will make when you're starting your craft.
I will, like, the oversaturation of, like, Wiccan theology and is a lot. I remember being interested in, like, witchcraft and all that kind of stuff when I was, like, 13, 14. And then as soon as, like, my friends started bringing up Wicca, I was like, you know what? No, I don't think this is for me. Yeah. And it still isn't, and it never will be.
Yeah. And we're seeing a bit of a pushback on that now, because a lot of occult creators, at least the ones that I follow personally, aren't Wiccan.
Yeah.
But that's very much a new thing.
Yeah.
Because Wicca has been the dominant thing in witchcraft spaces for quite a long time now.
Yeah.
And we're starting to see creators like Georgina and Nike and Olivia and Frankie,
Mm.
who are folk magicians, pagans, or in Georgina's case, Thelemites, practicing outside of Wicca and presenting concepts which aren't Wiccan, which predate Wicca, or which emerged after Wicca.
Yeah.
But are very different kind of paradigms
Yeah.
and ways of viewing witchcraft and magic. And I think it's really refreshing to start seeing those perspectives,
Yeah.
because when I first started getting into witchcraft, the only option was Wicca.
Yeah, and like personally, because like I'm a kitchen witch. Like that's a lot of my practice is kitchen witchery, but also I'd love to be like a green witch. Like, and I do kind of do some of that stuff, but a lot of the resources when I was first initially looking into it, very like Wiccan heavy, and like they don't disclose that they're Wiccan. You kind of end up sussing it out after reading a couple chapters, and by that time you've already like paid money for a book perhaps, so then it feels like you've essentially betrayed yourself, kind of. And not to say that they don't have good, like the books won't have like good information that's useful in your own personal craft that isn't Wiccan. It's just the information presents itself as very Wiccan focused, I guess.
Yeah, there is a problem as well with a lot of as this kind of emergence of non-Wiccan witchcraft comes into prominence, there is a problem with creators who are Wiccan writing Wiccan books that are not then branded as Wiccan,
Yeah.
either by them or by their publishers or editors. Because what is coming to the fore at the moment is not Wiccan.
Yeah. And it's quite frustrating.
It's quite frustrating because you'll find yourself picking up books
Yeah.
that 2 pages in turn out to be Wiccan.
Yeah.
And the information might be good, but especially when you're starting out your craft, you might not be able to pick up on those influences.
Yeah.
And you will think that you are reading a book which is not Wiccan, and then you will come into an occult space or community and realize that your perspective has been skewed towards a Wiccan perspective, even if you haven't realized it.
Yeah. So yeah, that's annoying. As like a tangent, like as like a BIPOC person, it's very annoying having all the resources that you're looking for about like practices from your culture end up being Wiccan dominant, because it's not Wicca's
it's not the space for Wicca.
Exactly.
It's an indigenous religion.
That's the words I'm looking for. Thank you. Yeah, it's not like their space to speak over us. And also there's a trend of big important people in Wiccan history destroying like the records of indigenous practices and such, and it's quite frustrating because that means the only resources we have left are Wiccan.
And we see that in New Age, like not just Wiccan spaces, but also New Age spaces as well, which do the same thing.
Exactly.
Essentially.
And like no hate to Wiccans, by the way. This is just
I think it's important that we are criticizing Wicca.
Yeah.
Not Wiccans.
Yeah.
Because
those are two different things.
Like it's like when I criticize, say, the Catholic Church, I'm not criticizing Kalo.
Yeah.
Like it's there is a difference between criticizing an institution,
yeah,
and hating on a person.
Yeah.
Because I don't think Wiccans are bad. I think a lot of the modern Wiccan belief systems are actually really valid. They're very kind of love and light and peaceful and not my vibe, but they're still valid.
Yeah.
However, I do think it's really important to acknowledge the history of your religion. And I think we will be doing an episode on these kind of topics later on, where we can talk about, like, even as a Hellenic pagan, the history of the Greek Empire and the Roman Empire, and how that affected records of Hellenic gods and the gods of the places that they conquered.
Yeah. And like, hey, I'm literally Christian. I have no place to like you know.
We need to assess. I think everyone's religion has to assess the history there and learning as you're coming into witchcraft and possibly Wicca, possibly paganism, possibly not. As you're coming into these occult spaces, you need to learn the history of the practices you're looking at.
Yeah.
Because you will come across, for some practices, a history of colonization, a history of appropriation, things that need to be returned to their traditional cultures, or at least given acknowledgement and appreciation.
Yeah.
And for some, you will find a history of having things stolen and having things covered up or suppressed. This is particularly true for predominantly BIPOC religions, such as Hoodoo, Voodoo, indigenous spiritualities. A lot of these have been covered up by colonial history.
Yeah.
Which is why history, I'm going on a tangent here because I am a history student.
Yeah.
And I love history and I'm really passionate about it. And I think knowing your history is important for your present and for building your future.
Yeah.
Because you can't just start afresh without acknowledging that, for example, I will be starting ahead of Kalo because I am a white middle class person and Kalo is a person of color.
From like a low socioeconomic background and all that kind of shit.
Like
you know? We're very different people.
We can't start from the same place.
Yeah.
In this new fresh world because there's a history of people like me oppressing people like Kalo.
Yeah. And like I feel like it's important, like especially when you get into stuff like Hellenic paganism and stuff, like when you're like researching about like ancient Greece, but you also have to acknowledge and respect the modern people from which that practice came influence. Like I'm Greek and I have a lot of words are hard, guys. Don't start a podcast if you can't speak.
Words are very hard.
Yes. But like as a like I know growing up, me being Greek was very important, and the resources about ancient Greece when I was younger, and also finding friends that were interested in ancient Greece also meant having friends that were interested in like the Percy Jackson series. And that thing that like personally I never got into it because I couldn't wrap my head around the idea of ancient Greek deities being in America.
Yeah, the displacement of ancient Greek deities towards the center of the world in America is very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's especially in a country like Australia where we are still very racist against people of Greek, Italian, and other Mediterranean descents.
Yeah, so like if that's going to be your practice, I'm not stopping you. I just need you to analyze your personal biases against like the modern group of people.
Yeah, like Hellenic paganism isn't a closed practice, but you still have to respect the people who live the culture and history of that country today.
Yeah. And it's like you have, especially with Hellenic paganism, it's like acknowledging how a lot of their folk practices and stuff became influenced by Greek orthodoxy as well, and like the importance of Christianity in those practices.
And the history of Hellenic and Roman paganism isn't just Greece and Italy.
No.
That history impacts all of the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
And a lot of spaces outside of it. So, for example, Hellenic paganism, you have to learn about the history of Greece, Turkey, Cyprus, and Macedonia.
Yeah.
Because those are all separate places with separate cultures, and they all have a really important influence on not only the history of Hellenic paganism and the traditional practices, but the modern elements of it and the modern realities that they are living. It's the same with Irish paganism. You can't practice Irish paganism if you're not going to learn about Irish people, if you don't know about the Troubles, if you don't know about colonial oppression. You can't just remove the modern day context from these practices.
Yeah.
Because there are people still living those realities in those countries. and taking their practices and their history without providing them some kind of support or at least acknowledgement is so, so disrespectful.
Yeah, it's extremely disrespectful. And you just shouldn't do it, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Get good, I guess.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. Don't be disrespectful. Get good. Stop being racist.
Yeah. And also, it's unlikely that you're actually going to even be able to develop a deep relationship with an entity from a culture that you are ignoring.
Yeah, exactly.
You can never have as deep a relationship with a spirit or an entity or a deity or a practice even if you aren't willing to learn about where it comes from, how it's evolved, and where it exists.
Yeah.
We got very distracted.
We
were originally talking about sources.
Yeah.
Whoops. It's good. We touched on a few points that we wanted to touch on anyway.
Yeah, we did.
But we didn't cover sources.
No.
So sources, you need to be able to find good sources, which can be very hard as you're starting out.
It's extremely hard.
I spent a lot of time on Pinterest and Tumblr when I was starting out.
Oh no.
TikTok didn't exist then, but I would have spent time on TikTok if I could have.
Yeah.
Don't be like me. There are spaces online which are really good for beginners. There are even some accounts on TikTok which are really good for beginners.
Yeah.
But they shouldn't be your only source.
No.
Cross-reference everything. Literally everything.
Yeah.
Take no one's word for anything. Unless you can find a source on it, it's probably not true. And when I say unless you can find a source on it, I don't just mean on the internet or in a book. I mean, unless you can find an indigenous person speaking about one of their practices, an indigenous elder, direct interaction, because a lot of these cultures are oral traditions. Similar with Irish traditions, a lot of them you will want to speak directly to Irish people.
Yeah.
Because they're oral traditions.
Yeah.
I'm lucky. Hellenic paganism is written down a lot of the time.
Yeah.
People who are less lucky, people who follow indigenous spiritualities in America, Australia, the Asia Pacific.
Yeah. Like, as a diaspora of, like, Balinese culture, finding resources on, like, Balinese magic online is very hard. And a lot of the time it's, like, behind, like, a university paper paywall thing. So I'm lucky I'm in university now, which means I can read them for free. But as soon as, like, I graduate, it's gonna be a lot more difficult, which is annoying. And also, like, actually finding the resource online but a readable copy of it, because, like, sometimes they'll have it listed but it won't actually be accessible. It's extremely frustrating and hard to do your research when that's the case.
I imagine a lot of those resources are probably not written by Balinese people.
No, actually I found one, but it's not, they don't have it online, and I have to go to, like, the National Library to read it in person.
And we're not going to do that right now.
No.
No. A little bit of a lockdown.
Yeah, can't do that.
But yeah, basically anything you're working with, if you can find a source that's from the original culture, that will be your best bet.
Exactly.
This goes even for things that are written about a lot, like Hellenic paganism. Going back to the original texts, Homeric texts, Hesiod, authors that I have listed in my resource doc, going back to those, preferably Greek authors. There are some cases where reading Roman authors will also be important to Hellenic paganism because they wrote about the gods. But Greek sources are going to be your most important resource.
Yeah.
And whatever culture you're working with, resources from that culture, whether they are oral or written or archaeological, whatever those sources are, going directly to them is going to be your best bet.
Yeah. And, like, just because a resource wasn't written by, like, a witch doesn't mean it's not valuable.
90% of my practice is actually based on academic texts.
Exactly, same here.
Like, people are always asking me for recommendations on books about, like, Hellenic paganism and neo-paganism and stuff, and I usually can't give them, because most of my practice is based in directly studying the history. Because I was into history and mythology before I was into witchcraft.
Yeah.
And when I started practicing, when I started working with gods, I went to those sources first. So if you're gonna ask me for neo-pagan sources, I'm really sorry, but I probably don't have them.
Yeah. Which, you know, completely fair and valid. And, like, even, like, in my practice, like, with my very Christian-focused stuff, like, yeah, the Bible is an important resource, but a lot of this stuff is just me reading academic sources about, like, the way medieval nuns thought, or, like, the history of queer religious people and stuff like that. That's influenced my practice, you know?
Yeah, when, like, if you're coming to me for resources, what I will offer you are going to be mostly academic, archaeological, or historical resources.
Yeah.
If that's not your thing, I'm sorry. But also, it's really important to learn about the cultural and historical context of your practices, so maybe you should make it your thing.
Yeah. If you don't like reading, there's always audiobooks, but, or if it's a website, you're reading facts off, text to speech.
Yeah, I use a Chrome extension called Speechify.
Yeah, actually, I've heard about that one.
It's really good.
Yeah.
You press play, you can set the voice to have the accent and speed and gender and stuff that you want it to have.
Yeah. It can make reading those text heavy things a lot easier. Because I know you'll never stop reading, essentially, is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Another thing that you kind of think as you're coming into witchcraft or paganism is, like, it's limited.
It's not.
You'll learn about X denominations, and you can learn everything about the ones that you want to work with, and then you're done. Unfortunately, that is not even remotely how it works.
Nope. Because, like, yes, there might be a limited amount of, like, the text about, like, an ancient religion that you're studying and also want to include in your practice, but there are archaeologists today that are still uncovering more and, like, finding out that information and how it fits into, like, that practice that you're practicing now is important, and you should always be, like, looking.
Literally last year they were uncovering new things in Pompeii.
Yeah.
There is still so much area of Pompeii that has not been uncovered. It's the same in Herculaneum. It's the same in a lot of other sites. Every time they try to build something in Rome, they uncover a new ancient site.
Yeah.
There is always more.
We don't know everything about history, so you'll never be able to finish reading about the history of your practice or just anything about it. As well as, like, new practices being made today.
If you're looking for an end line, if you're looking for something definitive that you can just learn all about and then stop and be done, witchcraft is not for you.
Any religion kind of isn't for you, if that's the case.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Witchcraft, paganism, most religion is not going to be for you. Because you can't actually. I don't think anything is going to be for you.
Yeah. If you were into language, because that's constantly developing as well and changing.
Yeah, like, this is a constant learning journey. It's like there is no end point in witchcraft. You can be a really advanced practitioner, and you will still have things to learn.
Yeah.
Your favorite authors all have things to learn.
Yeah. It's kind of like being a witch is almost like being a professional student, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, like, my teachers in high school used to make fun of me for that. When I would say what degrees I wanted to do, they're like, "Oh, so you're just going to be a professional student?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And it's kind of shifted into my religion as well.
Yeah.
Which
like,
is, yeah.
If I ever ran out of things to learn about my religion and my practice, I honestly think I would get bored with it.
Yeah, exactly. Because the thing about, like, my practice and my religion is that I find it so fascinating because there's so much to learn.
Not to mention your practice will probably change.
Exactly, that too.
Like, going into this, I was like, heck yeah, I'm going to be into Celtic paganism because most of my history is Celtic.
Yeah.
That did not happen. That did not happen.
Yeah.
I've worked with a couple of Celtic deities across a couple of different pantheons, but at the moment, only Greek deities.
Yeah. And, like, even with me, like, I mainly work with, like, the Christian god, I guess. But, even then, I never thought I would really get into, like, Balinese folk magic or, like, Greek folk magic either. But here I am doing those things, you know? And even, like, with Scottish folk magic as well, because I do some of that stuff. But the resources on that are even, like, harder to come by.
It's so upsetting.
Yeah, I just want to be Scottish. Leave me alone. Like,
why was the first book that was recommended to me on Scottish paganism written by an American?
ugh, hate that.
Written by Raymond Buckland, actually.
Ugh,
Yeah.
bad.
I still have it. I've read it. It's mediocre at best and full of lies at worst.
Yes. I read that one as well, didn't I? Because you let me borrow it.
Probably.
Yeah, it's not good.
It's not great. There are good resources on Scottish paganism out there, but you will struggle.
Yes.
There will be practices that you will struggle to find things about.
Yeah.
And
it's frustrating and annoying, but you just gotta do the work.
Yeah. If you're looking for an easy research journey, I think the best thing for you would be to go for something very mainstream.
Yeah.
But honestly, if you're looking for an easy research journey, anything witchcraft related, anything pagan, probably isn't going to be for you. And a lot of the deeper practices will be skipped over.
Yeah.
Even in mainstream religions.
Yep. Also, a lot of witchcraft isn't spell work.
No, I don't do that much spell work.
Yeah, I mean, like, because of my practice, because it's very Christian, I do a lot of blessings, and in that they kind of become spells, I guess, depending what lens you're looking at it through. But I don't know if I'd necessarily classify it as spell work, you know?
I do protection rituals and prosperity rituals.
Yeah.
Pretty regularly. Everything else, not so much.
Yeah.
Not very common. I've done one hex in 7 years because somebody was threatening my friends.
Yeah.
But it's still a matter of picking the correct timing, writing the hex. I take a lot of time with baneful workings.
Yeah.
Because I don't do them that often.
Yeah.
And when I do them, I want them to be done correctly.
Yeah, you want to make sure it's correct and that it actually works. Because if you do a baneful magic and you fuck up and it bounces back at you, you don't want that.
It's not going to go well.
No.
It's upsetting. Frankie has talked about accidentally fucking up a curse and having it backfire on them on their TikTok before.
Yeah.
It's not gonna be a fun experience.
Yeah, because, like, most of the spell work I do, so, like, yeah, blessings, that kind of stuff, but also protection, lots of protection spells, and also comfort spells for people that are, like, grieving.
Yeah.
And also, like, resilience, I guess.
Yeah, I've done, like, peaceful passing rituals and stuff, because most of the deities I work with are associated with death in at least some form.
Yeah.
Actually, all of the deities that I'm currently working with are gods of death in some form.
But yeah, it's like, spell work, it's fun, and it's interesting, and it's fun to do, but it's not everything.
Yeah, like, I think a lot of stuff goes around about, like, daily practice.
Yeah.
And personally, I would say that daily practice, or at least close to daily practice, is probably the best way to learn and, like, develop your journey relatively quickly and consistently.
However, it's not, like, feasible for most people. Like, we're both disabled.
Yeah.
It's hard, you know?
And Also, I think daily practice gets redefined every time someone talks about it.
Exactly, yeah.
When I say daily practice, I don't mean I want you to do a spell every day, meditate for 2 hours, and write an essay on some witchy topic.
Yeah.
My practice is not necessarily daily because some days I wake up and can't do anything.
Yeah.
But I try and do something as often as I can.
Yeah.
But that something can be anything from trying to meditate, even if I struggle because my ADHD makes me struggle with that shit, or reading a couple pages of a book.
Yeah.
Some days I do a spell. Very rarely.
Yeah.
My daily practice is not spell work.
Yeah.
And honestly, doing spell work daily is a one-way trip to burnout.
Yeah, and you don't want that. No one wants to be burnt out. Like, it's so annoying, especially because, like, having a work-life balance, trying to have a work-life balance and then having your craft be on top of that,
Yeah.
it's very hard. Like, I'm a support worker in my, like, day-to-day life, and I might go a little too hard and forget that I actually have my own chronic pain that I have to deal with, and then I won't be able to stand up, you know, without my back hurting.
And you're also a student.
Yeah.
Both of us work, both of us are students.
Yeah, full-time students.
And also have our craft and our business on top of that.
And, like, I also do, like, commission artwork and all that kind of stuff, and I do performances, and I wrote a musical last year. Like,
sometimes daily practice isn't gonna happen.
It's just not feasible sometimes.
And sometimes you have to make your practice fit into your life.
Yeah.
For example, I write a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I often dedicate poems to a deity or a working that I am trying to do at that time. Or literally something as simple as making tea with intention.
Yeah.
I spent all of my HSC year with a focus sigil stuck on the bottom of my teacup.
Nice.
And every time I made tea, would refresh the sigil and help me focus.
Yeah.
That was all I did for that year.
Yeah.
Because it was my HSC year and I was already dying.
Yeah. Daily practice is hard.
Daily practice is great. I encourage everyone to try and practice regularly.
Yeah.
But don't be too hard on yourself if you miss a day, if there are weeks where you can't practice. I've got friends who have taken like years break from the craft because they have simply not been up to it.
Mm-hmm.
And haven't been able to commit themselves to their practice, to their entities and deities, and so they have just stepped back completely. And that's so valid, but you do have to acknowledge that that will be a pause in your learning. If you're expecting to learn and practice at a relatively fast rate, you're gonna have to do it as often as you can. And sometimes that's not what we need. Honestly, if you need to take care of your health, your mental health, your mundane life, stepping back from the craft is possibly the best thing you can do for your craft at that time.
And, like, not to say that you can't still hang out and, like, discuss topics with people in the community.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to cut everything out of your life, you know? It's like when I was, like, whenever I'd go through some really tough shit, like, leaning back on my friends that are in, like, my religious community and such, and having them be there for me while not actually practicing it myself, like, actively, it can be a really good experience.
The term armchair occultist gets a lot of shit in our community.
Yeah.
Which I get.
Yeah.
There are some cases where there will be people who haven't done the work and haven't done the learning, who are sitting around and advising people who have actual practical experience. But honestly, I don't think it's that bad.
Yeah.
If you have to take a break from active practice, you can still help others if you have learning to pass on.
Yeah.
You can still help yourself grow by having discussions in occult spaces even while you aren't actively practicing.
Yeah.
being an armchair occultist isn't the worst thing you can be.
Yeah.
In fact, possibly being an armchair occultist is much better than a lot of the other people that comment on occult content.
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of misconceptions shared in that occult content about what is the right way.
Yeah.
What is the wrong way. And whether witchcraft is easy and whether you need to do research. And if somebody is coming into my comments essentially proselytizing at me, I'm going to delete that comment.
Yeah. Like, I won't put up with that shit.
I am not going to put up with comments that say that I have to be Wiccan, or I have to be Christian, or that you can't be Christian and a witch, or, like, anybody who's coming to you and telling you that there is only one right way to do something is wrong.
Yeah.
But equally, anyone coming to you and telling you that there is no wrong way to do anything in witchcraft is wrong.
Yep.
Because some things are wrong not only on a spiritual level, but on a mundane level. Like,
yeah.
For example, if I claimed to be smudging, I would be wrong.
Exactly.
Because smudging is a practice sacred to some Native American peoples, and smoke cleansing is very different.
Yep.
There are ways to do things incorrectly. There are ways to do things that are dangerous. Criticizing someone's UPG is very different from telling someone that what they're doing is dangerous or disrespectful. People are allowed to have their UPG. People are not allowed to disrespect entire cultures or steal from cultures or invade closed practices.
Yeah. I saw a vegan smudging kit.
Oh god, that was awful.
I was like, what the fuck?
They posted it in our Discord, and one of our friends, who I love very dearly, was like, I'm just trying to think about what the meat option would be, because it was a wooden feather?
Yeah, it was a wooden feather.
With a stick of white sage on top.
Yeah.
Now, first of all, if you're gonna be lighting something on fire, don't just set it on a wooden dish. That is not fire safe. Even if the wood doesn't catch on fire, which it probably won't if you're just smoldering herbs, it's gonna char.
Yeah.
It'll definitely be damaged.
Yeah.
And it's just overall not a great idea. Second of all, just because something is vegan doesn't mean it's ethical. Yeah. White sage shouldn't be used outside of the practices of the traditional owners of that craft. Yeah. Who are Indigenous American people.
Exactly. Like, the fact that there is so much white sage in Australia. Like, it's not even a plant we should have here. Like, get out. Like leave it alone.
People grow it in, I think it's in Tasmania.
Yeah.
And possibly Victoria.
Yeah.
That's only because it has been stolen from Indigenous practices by New Age practitioners and rebranded into some fun thing for white people to do.
And it's always like some fun hippie shit as well. It's never like Indigenous.
Oh yeah.
And I'm like, oh, it's just so frustrating.
They'll tell you that it's an age-old practice, but they don't actually know what it entails.
Yeah.
Because they've stolen it. And actually, something that was really interestingly brought up to me the other day. I follow an Indigenous Australian creator on TikTok, and she posted a video about eucalyptus.
Oh, nice.
And talked about, is eucalyptus a closed practice? Which I'd never thought about, despite living in Australia and using eucalyptus in my craft, because I've grown up with it around me and I would just harvest it from the trees growing on my property. And she didn't necessarily brand it as a closed practice, but she did point out that actually the ways we're using it are very different from the ways that Indigenous Australians use it. And we need to consider where we're taking that practice from. Yeah. And how, because eucalyptus is, of course, very different from white sage. It's not an endangered plant.
Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of my anger against white people, like non-indigenous people using it comes from, that it is an endangered plant that is in like specifically very important to specific indigenous communities.
Yeah.
And I don't want it to like not be available for them.
Yes. And eucalyptus shares a lot of the same traits with white sage. It's not endangered, but it's used in ceremonies, like its smoke particularly is used in ceremonies for cleansing and protecting by a lot of indigenous people in Australia, and they weren't allowed to do that for a really long time.
Yeah.
But white people have never been stopped from using it.
Yeah.
So it was like eucalyptus is something that I have absolutely taken for granted in my craft.
Yeah.
Because it's always been right there in my backyard.
Yeah.
So it was easy to get a hold of, easy to use. It's really flammable, so it burns well.
Yeah.
And it had never occurred to me that I should step back and be like, hey, actually, this plant I am taking from an indigenous tradition. And its uses are taken from an indigenous tradition.
Yeah.
And although it's not necessarily closed, I do need to consider how I'm using it, why I'm using it, and how I am paying back the communities that gave us this while I'm using their plants and their traditions of it. Because eucalyptus is not unique to Australia.
No, it's like pretty common in like the Oceania area. It's like Papua New Guinea, Papua, Indonesia. We all have it.
But it's very much also not native to Britain, where I and most of my ancestors come from.
Yeah.
So it's something that has absolutely been introduced to my craft through colonialism and through the fact that I am living on colonial land.
Yeah, rather than like me, like eucalyptus is just something that's always been a constant in my life because it's important to like my culture. And like most of the medicines that my family would give me growing up were like Indonesian medicines, and they were very like eucalyptus based because eucalyptus grows in Indonesia and it's just like our native plant.
And eucalyptus has always been a constant in my life.
Yeah.
But not from my culture.
Yeah.
Like, the only reason eucalyptus is a constant in my life is because my people colonized Australia.
Yeah.
And discovered that those plants had useful properties because indigenous people were already using them. Yeah. So while it is something that has come into my craft naturally through me being in Australia, I still need to consider how and why I got to Australia.
Yeah. I've never really thought about eucalyptus that way. That's really interesting.
I just thought I hadn't either. And the way the creator brought it up was really, like, it was really thought-provoking because I was like, actually, I'm out here using eucalyptus.
Yeah.
But why is it any different from...
Do you remember what creator it was?
Yep, at Balerginda.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
I will put it in the description and text you the username.
Fantastic. Yeah. But like eucalyptus as like in like smoke cleansing ceremonies is very like normal to me, especially like at my high school. We would invite like traditional custodians of the Darug Nation to come to our school, and at the beginning of the year or at the beginning of the semester they would always do like a smoke cleansing ceremony, and it was always the most beautiful thing. And I remember kids like my peers being like, oh, this is annoying, but I'm like, no, this is a beautiful part of indigenous culture that needs to be respected. Yeah, my school wasn't particularly diverse, but one thing we did have was an indigenous outreach program. Yeah. And every year during NAIDOC week, which is currently happening this week,
we had the indigenous students in the school came and they would perform a traditional dance. Yeah. And sometimes we would have elders come and do a smoke cleansing ceremony. Yeah. And it's so gorgeous and sacred. And we're really privileged to have been able to see that. Yeah. My first year of university, when I was still living in Western Sydney, I was a part of AIM, which is like the Australian Indigenous Aboriginal, what is it?
Australian Indigenous Mentoring Program or something like that.
Yeah.
And it was just so amazing being able to like be included in like their cultures and being like educated like that. Because like while I'm not Australian Indigenous, I was still Melanesian, which meant I could still like relate to a lot of their stuff, a lot of their cultural practices, especially like Torres Strait ones. And it was just like beautiful being able to be like a good influence and help them like be confident in themselves.
Yeah. And yeah, so the conclusion that was reached on this creator's particular video, I think, was it's eucalyptus itself is not closed because it's a common and available plant, but we need to pay that respect.
Yeah.
And acknowledge that what we're doing is very, very different from the ways that Indigenous Australians traditionally use that plant.
Yeah.
Because the smoke cleansing ceremonies that they do are unique to them.
Yeah.
And we don't have any right to take them.
Yeah.
Oh, everything in your craft should be magical.
Ugh.
Everything in your life should be magical.
No.
We're jumping back to daily practice a bit here.
Yeah.
Again, one-way road to burnout.
Yeah. Like, seeing the magic in everything is cool, and it can definitely enhance your practice. And I definitely take that approach to a lot of my life. However, it doesn't have to be that way.
And yeah, like if you want to see magic in everything, if you want to use magic in everything, go for it. But it doesn't have to be like that.
Yeah. Like, me seeing the magic in everything, it definitely has to do with like my perspective as like a Christian witch and seeing God in everything. But like a lot of people don't have a practice like that, and that's fine.
Yeah, like I spent a lot of time in my HSC year making tea magically.
Yeah.
Because it was the only thing at that time that I could squeeze my practice into. But you don't have to make a cup of tea magical every time you make a cup of tea.
Sometimes you just want tea.
Sometimes you just want tea. Not everything has to be this big magical ritual thing. You're allowed to just live your life. And if you want to put magic into something, you don't have to do it every time you do it. You can just do it the one time. Just do what feels right for you and let yourself breathe.
Yeah. It's good to have some breathing space.
Breathing space is good. Breathing space is really excellent.
It's also good to just like take a step back from your practice and see why you do everything you're doing.
Reassessing your practice even as you get further into it, good plan. Because otherwise you will get to a point where every morning you make your tea and you stir it clockwise and you don't know why. And what's the point then? Because you're not adding intention if you're just vaguely stirring something clockwise. If you don't know what you're trying to stir in, what's the point?
Yeah.
And this comes into another thing, which is you have to do shadow work. And that shadow work has to be part of your magical practice.
Yeah.
Because, personally, I think shadow work is important.
Yes.
I do shadow work.
Mm-hmm.
But I also do therapy.
Yep.
And I am also medicated for my mental illnesses.
Yeah.
Which is crucial to me being able to do shadow work as part of my magical spiritual practice.
Yeah.
If I didn't have the support network that I have, if I didn't have therapy, if I didn't have my medication, I wouldn't be able to conduct shadow work in my spiritual practice safely.
Yeah. Shadow work, like, okay, I'm going to speak from my psychology degree student perspective. It's important, but you need to be able to do it in a safe way. So like having a medical professional like a therapist or a psychologist there guiding you through it, at least initially in the beginning, is extremely important, and I do recommend that you seek that out if you do want to start doing it.
Especially if you have
trauma.
Yes, trauma or PTSD, CPTSD.
Yeah.
Anything that may lead to you spiraling.
Yeah.
Personally, I have depression and anxiety. Doing shadow work on my own was not a good idea when I was a depressed 13-year-old.
Yeah. Like, I only started doing my shadow work recently. Like, I'm 20 now. and I still need like my therapist there with me when I do it, because I have so much like repressed inner child bullshit that I just need to work through. And I personally, I do have CPTSD and like depression and anxiety and all this other stuff, and having a stable person there with me helping me bring me back and stop me from spiraling is extremely important, because shadow work can be triggering. You're bringing back all these important big feelings that you've repressed for a long time that can feel ugly and bad. And that's why you need that other person there to like help rein that in and be like, hey, just because these are the emotions you're feeling doesn't necessarily make you a bad person or make everything bad. This is just a moment that you're experiencing.
And aftercare,
yes,
is so important. I know aftercare has become like a sex thing.
Yeah.
This is not a sex thing. When you have used up your energy, when you have gone through something which is emotionally and mentally draining, such as a difficult session of shadow work, you need to look after yourself or let the people around you look after you.
Yeah.
Make a cup of tea, have a nap, cuddle a plushie.
Watch like your favorite comfort movie.
Studio Ghibli, here I come. You need to look after yourself after your shadow work, otherwise you are never going to be able to do it properly.
Yeah.
Because the point of shadow work isn't just to make yourself feel like a bad person, it is to recognize the things that you are repressing and then to reconcile them with yourself.
Exactly.
If you confront them and then shove them aside again, that is not completing your shadow work.
Yeah.
That's half the job.
Yeah.
Not even. Next time you confront them, you may well be back to square one.
Exactly.
You have to be able to take care of yourself afterwards and during. And that includes taking your meds.
Yeah, meds are important. I love my antidepressants, man.
Being medicated does not make you less magical.
Yeah.
Your mental illness does not make you more magical. Taking your meds doesn't change who you are as a person. It doesn't change who you are in your practice.
Yeah.
It helps regulate the neurochemicals in your brain so that you can function on a relatively level playing field with other people.
Yeah.
It's not going to take away your ability to do magic. If it takes away your ability to connect with your clairsenses, then I'm sorry, but you should probably get checked for a schizoaffective disorder.
Yeah.
Because if you can only connect to your clairsenses when you are off your medication or living your life in an unhealthy way, then that's probably not your clairsenses.
Yeah.
Or if it is, it's probably something that is fucking with you.
Yeah. Yeah, like as a person that experiences hallucinations, like from time to time, it's important to take your meds, you know? Because like my hallucinations aren't magical.
And having hallucinations doesn't make you any less magical.
Exactly.
You can still practice witchcraft if you have a schizoaffective disorder.
Exactly.
But
just make sure you're being safe.
Yeah.
That's all right.
Take your meds, be safe.
Yeah.
The only wrong way to do something is to make it disrespectful or dangerous.
Yeah.
Not taking your meds
is dangerous. Spitting facts today?
Yeah, absolutely. Take your meds and stay safe.
Yeah. You heard it here first. Well, I hope not first.
I hope you didn't hear it here first. I really hope that somebody else in your life has told you that taking your meds is a valid thing to do and is not going to change you as a person.
Because I know there's a lot of stigma against taking your meds, even like not in the magical community, but it's important that you do it.
It's very important that you do it. Please take your meds.
Yeah.
We already touched on this with the every witch is Wiccan. Not a thing. Not every witch is Wiccan, not every witch is pagan. But let's touch on it again.
Yeah.
Every witch reads tarot.
Not true.
Not any phrase that starts with every witch.
Yeah.
Probably doesn't actually apply.
Unless it's like the basics, like cleansing.
Yeah. Like there are some phrases where it's like every witch should be respectful of other cultures.
Yeah.
Every witch should be able to cleanse, ground, and protect themselves.
Yeah.
But
those are like it.
That's basically it. Any phrase that's like, every witch has to use this tool, every witch has to be a tarot reader, every witch has to be pagan, every witch has to work with deities. None of those are true.
Yeah, every witch has to use crystals. Like, crystals are cool, but I don't necessarily, other than like the amethyst I have on my altar, I don't really use crystals.
The crystal I use the most is my selenite tower.
Yeah.
It sits on my altar, and every day I take off my jewelry and I put my jewelry on the selenite tower and it cleanses it.
Yeah.
That's it. That, like, the other crystals I use occasionally in my craft, but most of the time they just sit on an altar.
Looking
pretty and being shiny things for my deities.
Yeah. Crystals are fun, but not every witch uses them.
Yeah. It's the same.
They're also expensive, so you shouldn't be expected to use them.
That's another thing. Any, like, tools that are expensive and, like, a lot of materials, you don't have to get materials when you start your craft.
Yeah.
I am thoroughly against the phrase intention is everything, but I am also thoroughly against this implication that in order to be a powerful witch, you have to spend heaps of money buying perfect, aesthetically pleasing materials.
Yeah.
Most of my deity candles are from the dollar store.
That's because it's cheap and it's accessible to us.
The biggest thing on my altar to Persephone right now is a big bundle of fake flowers, also from the dollar store. You don't have to spend heaps of money on your craft. The biggest expense in my craft at the moment is books.
Yeah. Oh my god.
And that's just because I like buying print books, when realistically, with my budget, what I should be doing is reading ebooks from Scribd. Yeah. Which I do sometimes. I do, because some books are really expensive.
Oh my god.
But if I can get a relatively cheap copy of a physical book, I'm probably gonna buy the physical book.
Yeah.
Because I am a sucker for that paper book.
Yeah, like, I'm the same. With my ADHD, it means reading on my devices can be quite hard. So having a physical book is really good for me. Except, it's so expensive. And, like, was it this year? It was this year.
It's this year.
We went to a secondhand book fair and we bought so many books. Oh my god.
We bought 6 bags of books between us the first time we went, and then we went back a second time and they were having a sale and it was $20 for however many books you could fit into a tote bag. And the amount of books that I fitted into that tote bag was unholy.
Yeah, like, we became Mary Poppins for like a hot minute.
Literally. We were just like shoving, but we were stacking and rearranging. I came home with like 30 books in this tiny little tote bag. Yeah. It was great.
Like, the first time we went, it was like over $300 worth of books, secondhand books, 6 bags.
6 bags. Yeah. So that, like, we spent a lot of money between us. Yeah. But we also got that was a one-time expense for books that are going to last us ages. I got encyclopedias of Greek mythology, Greek history.
I got like a really fucking old Catholic Bible, as well as like a Quran, and then like this, like, so many like Christian art books as well, about like those tiny little paintings from the Middle Ages, which is pretty fun.
I got a bunch of dictionaries for Latin.
I also got a ton of like Indonesian books, as well as some Greek stuff.
So basically, secondhand bookstores, your friend. Yeah. Don't spend too much money on materials in your craft. Yeah. Unless you're like, especially when you're starting out. I have so much shit from when I was starting out that I do not need. Yeah. I went out and I bought tons of crystals, and I spent all of my like allowance that I had when I was like a 14-year-old on buying freaking crystals, when actually the things that I use the most are the pieces of quartz rock I picked up out of my paddock and jawbones from dead livestock. As soon as you get into your craft, don't rush out and buy everything. Yeah. The first few months of your craft can actually be entirely free. There are so many good resources online. There are so many things that you can do to protect yourself and your house and cleanse that will involve either nothing except visualization or maybe some herbs from your kitchen.
Yeah.
Because
like a bay leaf if you want to do one of those spells.
Yeah, like bay leaves, mixed herbs. If you can get like an Italian herb like mix, it will have a bunch of protective herbs in it. Just use that. Your kitchen should have spices in it.
Yeah, if it doesn't, it's a bad kitchen.
If your kitchen doesn't have herbs and spices in it, I am concerned for you. And if it does have herbs and spices in it, bam, there's your first tools.
Yeah.
You do not have to spend money. In fact, I would recommend for the first 6 months of your craft, as you're learning the basics and until you understand the very basics, you shouldn't buy anything.
Yeah.
Because you don't know what you're going to be using, you don't know what you're going to be interested in. If you're gonna buy anything, buy candles and whatever from the dollar store.
Yeah, like a box of incense is like $2.
Yeah, like dollar store has incense, candles. Honestly, 90% of the stuff that I use is from the dollar store.
The only time I don't actually, now that I'm thinking about it, the only thing on my altar that's not from like the dollar store is because I imported a saint portrait from Greece and I got that on Etsy. Other than that, like all my shit's from the dollar store.
Yeah. The only things I don't buy from the dollar store are crystals.
Oh yeah, and my crystal.
Bones, because I just pick them up from the paddocks.
Yeah.
Yeah, crystals and bones and rosemary, because we have a giant rosemary bush in our backyard.
And you can buy a bundle of that rosemary from our backyard on our website.
But yeah, basically, you don't actually need to spend that much money when you're starting your craft.
Yeah.
And if you are going to spend money when you're starting your craft, spend frugally and buy things that are basic and that you think will have long-term use.
Yeah. Especially, like, if you're renting and you're in an apartment where you're not allowed fire or anything like that, don't even bother with the candles. Buy some LED ones if you really want it.
Yeah, you can get LED candles from most dollar stores, Kmart,
Target, Big W, whatnot.
Like, just don't jump straight. As much as I want to support occult businesses, when your budget is limited and you're just starting out, jumping straight into going to occult stores and buying out their stock of crystals is not a smart decision for your craft.
Yeah.
You're just gonna end up with a bunch of crystals that you may not use and you may end up trying to resell or give away. Like, honestly, my offering cups to Hades and Persephone, I bought them for like $2 each from the reject shop.
Yeah. And then the one you got for like Dionysus, that was like from Big W.
Yeah, that was from Big W or Kmart.
Yeah.
There's my jar for Kate was actually it came with something else in it as a gift.
Yeah.
And the bowl for Namarigna is actually just a bowl from IKEA.
Yeah.
Which I stole from my parents because we have tons of these little teeny tiny plastic bowls that we've had literally since I was like 2.
Oh, wonderful.
So I nicked one and covered it in black wax.
Nice.
And now it is my offering bowl to Namarigna.
But yeah, so you don't have to spend a lot of money. Just because, like, and it doesn't have to be aesthetically pleasing either. Because, like, I know aesthetics are important to people. Aesthetics are important to me, especially. My entire
Says
thing.
The artist.
Yes, I'm an artist. Aesthetics are important to me. My entire room is like an aesthetic.
Yeah.
Yeah, red walls, Baroque style painting frames. You know, aesthetics are important to me. But just because you're starting off, and like you want things to be pretty and big and amazing, doesn't mean they have to be. Like travel altars, like they're very useful. You know.
Also, recycle and reuse stuff.
Yeah.
Like my altar in my parents' house was trunk, like an old suitcase that my dad had in his cupboard. And I got it down and I emptied it out and I filled it with all of my witchy shit. And then I put a little white shawl that used to be my grandma's over it, and that was my altar cloth.
Yeah.
And that was has been my altar until I moved into this house last year.
Yeah.
So that's like 6 years of that trunk being my altar.
Yeah.
Most of the bottles and stuff that I put things in, they're either just washed out like wine or gin bottles.
Yeah.
Or they're old bottles that were just lying around our house because my dad's a hoarder and has never thrown anything of my grandma's out after she died.
Fair enough.
It's very convenient.
Yeah.
I get all of these, like, ancestral related items from just going up. We have a, like, shipping container in the paddocks, and I just go up there and I can get, like, old jewelry. I also have all of my grand's old jewelry.
Aww.
Because when she died,
yeah,
my auntie didn't want it.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, I'll have it then. So I literally just have it all in a bag down there.
Nice.
I've had it since I was 7.
Oh.
It's forever there. Those boxes all up on my ancestor altar, they're all from her
cute
house and her, like, jewelry boxes and stuff like that.
I just have my great grandma's ring because I think my mum took it when they had their funeral and they were sorting everything out. My mum took that bit of jewelry and she gave it to me like a couple of years ago, and I've just kept it ever since.
Yeah, no, I just have, like, all of my grandma's jewelry.
Yeah.
That's most of what I have. I have one of her jumpers as well, actually.
Oh.
But yeah, just reuse and recycle things, because actually you can probably get some really good connections out of it as well.
Exactly.
For example, if you're reusing things from your grandma's house, they're probably pretty well tied to your ancestry.
Exactly. So, like, if you're trying to do ancestor work, that's a good way to start.
It's a good way to start. My ancestor altar is entirely made up of a candle from the dollar store, a rosary and a couple of cards from the Catholic Society at our uni, because they were giving them out for free.
And we just nicked them. We were like, thank you, we're not Catholic. Bye.
Yep. The notices from my gran and granddad's funerals, and stuff out of my grandma's jewelry stash, and baskets that she used to use in her house, and a teacup, and, like, they're all out of there. And then there's the herbal tower and a crystal that we discovered in our paddocks one time.
Yeah. Like, on my ancestor altar, I have, like, a picture of my grandma that I printed out and stuck on a tiny canvas. I have a candle I got from the dollar store, another rosary that we got from the Catholic Society at our uni. Very useful.
Yes. Thank you, Catholic Society at our uni.
We appreciate you.
Shout out.
And then I also have the perfume that she used to wear there as well. And whenever I spray it, I'm like, smells like grandma. Because it's a very big grandma smell.
Yeah, like, honestly, half of my altar to Hades and Persephone is actually taken up with books.
Yeah.
Because Hades is also a god of wisdom, so he would appreciate me learning about things.
Exactly. Yeah, my altar is on my bookshelf. It's the top shelf on my bookshelf. And then the shelf underneath it is, like, theology books as well as arts and poetry, because it's, like, Christianity plus God is, like, a god of creation. So art and poetry are things that he likes.
Yeah, I've got my altar to Hecate and Namarigna and Dionysus on my bookshelf.
Yeah.
So yeah, and 90% of my books are pagan and occult books or feminist books.
Exactly. It's
so
fun.
It fits.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah.
But yeah, moral of the story: recycle, reuse, and don't spend that much money when you're just starting out, because as you figure out what you want your practice to be, then you can start buying into things.
Yeah, because, like, crystal ones look cool, but barely anyone actually uses them.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie, when I first started out, I was like, I need an atame, and I need a wand, and I'm gonna be Wiccan, and now I have, like, an old wooden spoon, again from my grandma's house.
Yeah.
Most of my, like cauldron work has been done in an old saucepan, again from my grandma's house. I don't have an atame, but I would like to get a knife.
Yeah.
But that's just because I want a knife.
Because knives are pretty.
Knives are pretty.
Like, especially the jeweled ones. Oh my gosh.
Knives are pretty, and I feel like Namarigna would appreciate it.
Oh yeah.
If I'm actually directing my energy most of the time, which is what people use wands for, I will either use my hands or a quill.
Nice.
Or just a pen.
Yeah.
But I usually use a quill because it's pretty and aesthetic.
Yeah.
And I have it anyway.
Yeah, exactly. There's no shame in being, like, wanting for things to be aesthetically pleasing. Just make sure you keep your budget in mind.
Yes. And practicality.
Yeah.
Because when you're first starting out, things can be aesthetically pleasing without dedicating you to one particular sect.
Yeah.
Or practice. Like,
Yeah.
you can make a basic candle look really gorgeous without, and like candles are going to be something that a lot of people use.
Yeah.
Basically, buy practically for yourself and consider what you actually know you're going to use before splurging. Which is, we've talked a lot about altars in this.
Yeah.
And I do want to touch on that because altars we both personally have.
Yeah.
But you don't necessarily have to have.
Yeah.
At least not straight away.
Yeah. It can be forever until you actually have a proper altar. And also like the context of like what an altar actually is. Because like there are a lot of things that you probably wouldn't assume are altars that could count as altars. But at the same time, it's like not necessarily that important to have one.
Yeah, like what I refer to as like my altars, some people would refer to as shrines.
Yeah.
Because they're dedicated specifically to, say, Hades and Persephone, or my ancestor altar, or Dionysus, Namarigna, and Hecate all have their own little spaces on an altar.
Yeah.
What I don't have is a working altar, which is what a lot of people refer to as an altar. They mean like a space where you conduct all of your workings.
Yeah.
Personally, I do that at my desk.
Yeah.
Because we're in a relatively small room. The biggest open space that I have where I will have enough space to set up a working is gonna be my desk.
Yeah. I tend to, so like my altars as well would probably be more so classified as shrines, but my main altar on my bookshelf, sometimes I'll do workings there depending on what it actually is that I'm doing, but a lot of the time I'll just do it on my bed or my desk.
Yeah. Because obviously I use my desk for studying as well because I'm a student, and I use it for creating content. And I sit there when I'm streaming, so it gets a lot of use.
Mm-hmm.
So before I use it, I clean it and then I cleanse it. Then I do my working, and I'll often then set the working either on the windowsill to charge or on one of my altars. But when I'm actively doing the working, when there's a candle actively sitting there burning with herbs or oils, when I'm making the jar, when I'm putting things together, that's all happening at my desk. It's not a space that is constantly dedicated to witchcraft. It is a space that I use for other things, cleanse and use for witchcraft, and then cleanse again and start using for mundane things.
Yeah.
Because that's practical for me. Some people are lucky enough to have an entire room
Those people
dedicated to witchcraft. I
had a friend when I used to go to my youth group whose parents worked at the church, and they had a whole room dedicated to prayer. Like the two parents would wake up in the morning like 5 a.m., pray for a couple hours just in that room, and then they'd go on with their day.
I would love to have a room that I could dedicate to my craft and my gods. That is not currently practical for me.
No.
I am a uni student. I have a very limited budget. We are renting a house, and there's 3 of us living in it, and there are 3 bedrooms.
Exactly.
It
wouldn't work.
Unless we want to kick one of our housemates out.
Which we don't. We're all lovely.
And also, we would then have to pay more rent.
Exactly. Gross. Don't like that.
Yeah, like it's not practical. I don't want to kick any of our housemates out because I like living with Kalo and our other housemate because we get along well.
Yeah.
And we split the rent and we split the work.
Mm-hmm.
But I would like to have my own room for witchcraft.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen right now. Maybe one day.
If we ever are in our own houses. One day.
One day. Perhaps.
Maybe. If there's no more housing crisis happening. Laughs in Australian.
Oh, we cry.
Anyway.
Baneful magic?
Yeah. Baneful magic. Explain to me, Percy, what is the exact definition of baneful magic?
Baneful magic is, for example, hexes, curses, jinxes. It's where you are using your magic to project harm onto others. Some people would classify some justice magic under baneful magic. Personally, my baneful magic leans more towards the justice side.
Yeah, same.
But baneful magic gets a pretty bad reputation.
Yeah.
because when you think of baneful magic, a lot of people coming into the craft think of like the 3 forbidden curses in Harry Potter. They're like, you're gonna just straight up murder someone, and that's not necessarily what baneful magic is. Like, you're not just pointing at someone and going crucio and they're gonna writhe in pain.
Gosh, yeah.
That's not how it works.
A lot of like the baneful magic I do is like the very much like, oh, everything you did to hurt this person that I care about is now going back to you.
Yeah.
So it's not me really wishing ill will, it's more like just you're getting what you did.
Baneful magic doesn't have to be part of everyone's craft. I'm not gonna force you to do baneful magic.
In fact, it can be very scary to do baneful magic if you're not familiar with it.
I don't do it often.
No.
But it is part of my craft. I am not somebody who believes in never doing baneful magic or never doing retributive magic.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it can be necessary, and sometimes you're in a position where your only way to regain power or control over yourself is by hexing someone.
Yeah.
I think insisting that doing baneful magic makes someone a bad person,
Yeah.
or
Especially
it makes your
like,
craft evil, is classist
Yeah.
and often racist.
Yeah, that's a point I was about to bring up. Like, especially because, like, I have a lot of friends that are, like, African American, and they're witches. And, like, they'll talk about, like, the role that, like, baneful magic has played in, like, their community, and how a lot of the time it was, like, slaves practicing baneful magic as a way to get back at the slave masters and colonizers and such like that. So, like, it exists in a, like, they're not doing baneful magic just to be mean, you know? They're doing it for a specific reason.
Yeah, like,
to gain back some agency.
I think the term baneful magic and the term hex gets thrown around a lot in our community as though it's this really common petty thing.
Yeah.
But it actually takes a lot of work and a lot of energy to actually hex someone effectively. It's not something that most people are gonna do just because you piss them off a bit on the internet.
Yeah, the people that threaten that all the time, I probably, like...
Their hexes probably aren't very powerful.
Exactly.
And honestly, I wouldn't listen to any of their advice.
Yeah.
If somebody says they're gonna hex you over internet drama, they're probably not worth listening to.
Yeah.
The other thing is that when people say hex, a lot of what you will get is a lot of kind of love and light Wiccans reacting badly and citing the Reed and the threefold lore, and kind of a lot of the time implying like the terms light and dark magic come up so often. And we're gonna do
light and dark magic or black and white magic.
Yeah, we're gonna do a whole episode on that kind of language. But basically, short version, racist. Because when people say light magic, they're usually referring to Wicca or New Age spirituality, which is very Eurocentric and dominated mostly by white people. And when they say dark magic, they are often referring to hoodoo and voodoo, specifically, and some indigenous spiritualities.
Yeah.
Because those are the ones that we see depicted in media, where you get things like mojo bags and voodoo dolls and things like that, which are very misrepresented and very commonly misrepresented in our media.
Like, when you think of what a voodoo doll looks like in media, it's completely wrong. That's not even what they look like.
It's not even what they're used for either.
Yeah,
like that
too.
And also, voodoo dolls are one very specific thing that don't look like how we think they do and are not used for what we think they are used for. And in fact, a lot of cultures use puppets, which would actually be more similar to what we see portrayed as voodoo dolls in like Western media.
Be mindful of like the take a step back and analyze the language that you use when discussing different types of magic, because especially if you're white, it's probably some kind of racist thing there.
you need to be careful examining your own internal biases. I think that's possibly the most important lesson that you will learn coming into the craft, if you haven't learned it already, is that you need to examine your own internal biases.
And also, a bias isn't necessarily bad either. It's just like a way of thought.
Everyone has biases. I was writing about this recently for a research class that I'm going to be doing. Everyone has biases.
Yeah, there's no such thing as unbiased source.
What you need to be able to do is critically review your own biases and the source's biases.
Exactly. And from there, you can, like, suss out what it's trying to say, what ideas it's trying to present.
And whether or not those ideas are ones that you are willing to consider or agree with.
Yeah. Like, someone trying to, like, read up on Norse paganism, especially, being able to suss out whether or not a source is extremely racist is very important.
Yeah. Any sources on, like, Norse and Celtic paganism that talk about, like, blood quantum and things like that, you should be wary of.
Run and don't look back.
Be very wary, especially, unfortunately, in traditions like Asatru. Very racist in some circles. It's basically been taken over by white supremacists in a lot of places.
Yeah.
You may have heard of the Asatru Folk Assembly, which set up a white-only church somewhere in America. I think it was Michigan. There is a lot of problems with inclusivity and just outright prejudice in occults, particularly pagan communities.
Yeah. It's not nice. And honestly, as, like, a person of color, I think that's probably one of the reasons why it took me so long to actually get involved in the occult community.
Magic is much more accessible to white people because we are much less likely to be stolen from or hate crimed by fellow white people.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think that was everything we wanted to touch on. So thank you for listening.
Yeah. Like, this was a really long episode. I'm glad you sat through it if you did.
Yeah. We appreciate you.
Yes, we do.
And we hope you will tune in to our next episode, which is going to be on side wound theology. Which I have to immediately start reading up for because I am going to be woefully uneducated on that.
So, like, a lot of things are going to be very not safe for work, but they aren't, just because that's the language used to... Yeah.
So be wary of next week's episode. If you're underage, probably don't watch it.
Yeah. Also, like, if you feel very uncomfortable with gore and
sexual topics,
and also kind of like a little bit of cannibalism. Just not actual cannibalism, but like cannibalism in the way of, like, you know, the Eurochrist.
Anyway. Yeah, thank you. We appreciate you. Tune in next week if you want to hear about the side wound of Christ and the theology surrounding that.
Yeah.
And possibly some lesbian nun stories.
Yes.
Otherwise, keep an eye out on our social medias because we have some new jewelry coming out as soon as we get it up. This is Percy.
This is Kalo.
And thank you for listening to Muses and Mystics.
It's been a great time.
Bye! On that
it's going to be fantastic. I'm going to say so many cursed things, like Jesus is